Good morning, everybody. So glad you could join us today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Suzanne LaRue, and I'm one of the leaders of our ladies' coffee break. And please, before you sit down, make sure that you pick up the papers beside the coffee there, because you can write notes and there's information, so please make sure to pick up that. And also, if you could try to move up closer to the front, because we might be having a discussion later and you'll be able to see the slides, and it's a little bit more intimate if we can all move to the front and be together as a group. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to settle in, and then I have a few announcements. Good morning, ladies. This is fantastic. So glad you were able to make it. Hands off, because I am too much feedback. Wanted to welcome you again to Living Hope, Ladies Coffee Break. To those of you that are new, we're so excited you could be here with us for this presentation on a very hard subject, that's for sure. How many people were at the IF conference on the weekend? Ooh, was that not fantastic? What a great turnout we had, even with the snowstorm. So thrilled that everybody could make it. A lot of great speakers, a lot of great breakouts, and actually a lot of great food. Just a couple of announcements before we go forward with the presentation. Since we did have to cancel one of the coffee break sessions, we will be carrying on with session 6 of You Are Free. Not next week, because of course next week is March break, but the following week. So we'll be able to finish that up, because we still had one more date left at the end. So we can just shuffle our schedule a bit, which is great. The week that we come back, it's my group's turn to bring snacks. So just an FYI. Tomorrow morning, for those of you that are part of our outreach program as well, we're meeting at Trinity United Church at 10 o'clock in the morning. They have a lot of needs there, as they're a stopgap for the homeless. So they have needs with helping with food prep and cleaning up inside and outside. So there are quite a few of us that are planning to meet there at 10 o'clock, Trinity United Church on Reed Street, for those of you that want to help me pick up garbage. We are going to start putting out a monthly bulletin for coffee breaks, so everybody will have a schedule of the events coming up, and anything that you may need will be put in that bulletin. It's not going to be a marketplace, but if you have a specific need, such as a ride, or you need a certain piece of furniture or something for the Micah house, this will all be included in the bulletin. Other than that, all is great. It's a beautiful day today, and we're thrilled to have a guest speaker, and I'm going to ask Anita to come up and introduce her. Thanks, everybody.
I'm delighted to introduce Cheryl Robinson, our speaker today. So Cheryl has been working in the field of mental health and addictions for over 20 years and has been a registered psychotherapist since 2015. Cheryl worked for 15 years at a community addiction and mental health center before becoming the clinical practice lead. She then served as clinical director as a residential treatment center, providing mental health and addiction support to individuals. Currently, Cheryl continues to support individuals at a wide variety of needs at Hope for Today Counseling, her private counseling practice. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining us today for our discussion on ways to manage anxiety and depression symptoms, and for us to look at healthy coping strategies and how to take holistic approaches to our mental health. Thank you so much for coming, Cheryl.
Good morning. So nice to be back at Living Hope. We have many fond memories at coming to meet people here on a Sunday morning. We were part of the REMA community for many years, so it's just so nice to see so many familiar faces. This is going to be a little bit interactive. So what that means is there's going to be times I'm pausing and we're going to hear from the crowd. And you can let me know, if you're driving with the material, if you want to add in, just put up a hand. I'll be sure to stop and include you. So we're going to talk about anxiety and depression today. And part of where I started to really form a passion inside of myself to support people with addictions and mental health was that I first started my work as a counselor at the Brock Mission. So it was a homeless shelter. It was very different back then. We were just in a house on Brock Street, so it was much smaller. But I started to see this cycle. And maybe you've seen this cycle in your own life, or maybe you might have seen this cycle in friends or family's lives. Is that somebody is doing poorly maybe with their mental health, struggling with their addiction, and then what happens is they might do better for a little while. And they learn some skills, and we might be seeing some success, and they might be feeling like they're a bit more competent around their skills, but then we see the slippage happening, or maybe another word we can talk is relapse. So relapse can be part of our mental health as well as part of addictions, can't it? And so then we see the cycle start again. And it was that cycle that I kept watching over and over again that I wanted to see if I could be part of breaking that cycle for people. So that's what I've kind of focused my entire last 20 years on, is trying to help people break that cycle. So Mike, we thank you for helping us this morning, and Mike's going to move the slides for us, so if you can just move on to the next slide. So before we begin, we know that everyone in this room has been touched with mental health and addictions. It's your own mental health and addictions. You're living with someone with mental health and addictions. You grew up with somebody with mental health and addictions. Your coworkers have challenges. We know we're all affected. So we need to somewhat guard our hearts, don't we? And understand that when we talk about anxiety and depression, there's going to be lots of emotions that come up for us, and that's a very normal thing. And so if you need to take a breather, or if you need to go get another cup of tea, please make yourself comfortable while we work through this. Okay, Mike, so maybe the most important slide is this one. So let's everybody focus very clearly, and for the people at home that are going to watch this later on, this seminar on anxiety and depression will share some introductory information, but does not replace physician or psychiatric care or recommendations. In other words, we're still going to follow what our psychiatrists and our doctors are telling us to do, right? But this might be some additional things that we might want to put into our schedules. Okay, Mike, we're ready to go. Okay, true or false? In a given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental illness or addiction problem. True. Good job, guys. That was quick. So that lets us know that when we just look around this room, many of us could put up our hands and say, yeah, we've been in that 1 in 5, or we can suspect that at one point we're going to be in that 1 in 5. Okay, Mike, next one. Great. So the importance of language. So one of the things that I really encourage people to do as we talk about mental health and addictions is to try to get away from labels. So what do I mean by labels? Labels might be things like, I am a depressive, right? As opposed to, I struggle with depression, you know? Or, you know, so my daughter was letting me know that sometimes the youth are wearing sweatshirts that say anxiety or anxious. It's almost like they're broadcasting, right? And so we can say we're struggling with anxiety, but we don't want to take it on as an identity, right? Labels around addictions, right? People will say terms like addict or alcoholic. Again, people are much more than a label. So I worked at a residential treatment center for men who were struggling with mental health and addictions. And I'm going to tell you that a lot of people over the years had told them many labels, like they're addict, they're an alcoholic, but they were much more than that, weren't they? Right? They were brothers, they were sons, they were fishermen, they were hard workers, they were part of a friend group. And so we want to kind of avoid using the labels and start to describe mental health and addiction things as more like symptoms or things we struggle with as opposed to things that we are. Okay, Mike, if you're okay to go to the next one. So anxiety, you guys know, if I didn't show you this screen and I could say to you, you know, tell me symptoms of anxiety, everyone in this room could come up with these things, right? And so where we struggle with anxiety is it might be situational, like we're going to go write a really hard test or we're going to go try doing something we haven't done before. But then there could be times of occurrence where we're experiencing this anxiety for weeks or months or maybe even years. And then depression, again, I know that you guys know what depression is, but what's important about depression is for us to remember that when things last for more than 2 weeks, where it's starting to affect our areas of daily living, like I'm not going to school, I'm not going to work, I'm not going out to the grocery store, I'm not showering, then it's time to probably get some support. And you would be these things are very common. There's going to be change in our appetite, sleep problems, loss of interest. Maybe we're withdrawing from family and friends, and then that hopelessness sets in, right? Like, can things ever change? So let's look at this on a continuum. So I don't want anyone sitting here going, no, I don't have depression and anxiety, or I do have depression and anxiety, right? There's a lot of space between those two things, right? So it might be the sort of thing where you're able to go, yep, I've experienced crises around my mental health, but I'm not there anymore. I've moved into maybe struggling, where I'm still experiencing it, and I'm not sleeping as well as I should, I'm not eating as well as I should, but I'm also not in crisis. Then if you slide down this spectrum here, we've got the people who are surviving. So they're worried, they're nervous, but they're maybe still getting to work on time, they're maybe still doing those activities of daily living, they're still cleaning even if they don't feel like it. And then we move into the thriving stage where people are going back to that kind of regular state, and there's some hope in that. And then excelling as people are cheerful and joyful and high performance, and they're kind of realizing their potential, they're living their best life. And so we can look through our lives. There's a lot of years represented here, right? Of times that we might have been more in crisis, times we were struggling, times we might have been more surviving, thriving, and then excelling. And so part of my challenge this morning is if we find ourselves a little more on the left-hand side of things, perhaps we can just remind ourselves we don't need to stay there, right? Could we find a way to get some supports in our lives to even move us from maybe struggling to surviving, right? And then maybe over time from surviving to thriving. And so many times, especially with women, and I don't know what it is with us, but we end up tolerating things, right? So I meet a lot of women who've lived with chronic pain, and I'm like, what is your doctor saying? They're like, oh, I didn't speak to my doctor about it. And it's like, oh, maybe we should go and speak to our doctor. I'm seeing some nods here, right? Because women, we kind of like those brave little soldiers, right? And so we might have gotten used to struggling with our mental health, and maybe today is a challenge for us to say maybe we can take the next step to work in some of these goals to be able to maybe shift something in our mental health. Okay, now we can't talk about mental health without talking about addictions. So here's mental health, here's addictions, and most often you're finding them concurrently, right? So that the addictions might be making the mental health symptoms worse, the mental health symptoms are high, so we're drawn to our addictions. And let's not just think substances with addictions. So I'm going to give you the easy ones, alcohol, drugs, right? But what are some other addictions out there that people might struggle with? Yes? Sugar, thank you. Sugar, so that could be like even connected to eating, right? Yes, okay. Another chocolate lover out there, I see. We're with our friends, that's good, okay. Yes. Shopping, thank you. So people go and they have this high or this euphoria, like as we're filling our baskets, right? And we go home and we're like, but then the next day we look at the Visa bill and what do we have is that slump, right? Maybe we spent too much money. Very similar to addictions with alcohol and drugs. We have the high, but then we have the crash. Great ideas. Yes? Yes, yes. So almost like a relationship addiction, right? Where I can't sit and be myself. I always have to be getting feedback from others, right? And that can feel very futile, right? It takes a lot of work to keep getting that constant feedback. Great, great one. Other ones? Social media, yeah. So people get on it, and social media can be a wonderful distraction, right? And probably is very helpful in our lives to be a distraction, but then we find ourselves on it for hours and hours and hours, and what used to be maybe a good coping strategy has become a not so helpful coping strategy. Yeah. Anyone else, anything else comes to mind? Yes. Gaming, thank you. So gaming, video gaming, gambling might be falling into this category. So there's lots of ways that addiction can involve us. And think of this continuum, okay? So over here on the left-hand side are people who say, I don't use it all. I don't use anything, okay? So we won't do this today because I don't know everyone as well. And I don't know how well you guys know each other, but let's just pretend I asked you all to stand up. And I said, sit down if you had a coffee or a tea this morning. Would we say maybe 75% would sit down? Would we? Maybe? Right? Yeah? Good. So caffeine is a substance, right? And then if I said, have you ever used a benzodiazepine for anxiety or a benzodiazepine for sleep? Have you ever had dental surgery where you had to use an opiate or physical surgery where you had to use an opiate? You know, more people would be sitting down, right? And then if I went into, does anybody here smoke? Sit down. Has anybody ever used recreational drugs in their past? Has anybody had, drank? Again, more, I think it would be safe to say no one would be standing, right? And so sometimes we're quick to go, oh yeah, we find ourselves here in the non-use, but in reality in North America, there's really no such thing as that, right? That there would be something in someone's life that they would be using. And then we move over here to this experimental stage, where again, people can stop using. Where do we see a lot of experimentation with substances? If I was to say, I need to go find someone who's experimenting with drugs, where do you think I should go? Yes, okay, I think we should go to high school because there's a pretty good chance, right, that someone's going to be experimenting. And then we move more into a social use, and this could be substances, but this could be gambling. Someone pops into the casino, right? Someone's gaming, twice a week, right? So it's recreational. I'm still choosing to do it. I'm not feeling like I have to. And then we cross that dotted line. Do you see that dotted line there? And it's nice that on this PowerPoint, we can see that dotted line so clearly, isn't it? And that's where problems start to become associated with things we depend on, whether that's substances or behaviors. In real life, that line does not come up. Let me give you an example. Someone goes home at night, has a glass of wine with dinner, pours himself another glass of wine, pours himself another glass of wine. Now that's going to affect their sleep. And what happens is they've crossed over into some problematic use, but that red line didn't come down and go beep, 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 right? Be aware, or somebody stops taking their vitamins. On day 3, that line comes in, beep, 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 beep. Or, I stopped going to the gym after 4 days. It's like beep, 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 beep. Unfortunately, there's nothing cueing us, right? And so sometimes we can slip over this line and be in that regular use or regular behaviors, and we're kind of not even aware that we kind of slipped past there. And problems start to happen. And then lastly, we find that dependency where I'm not only physically dependent, but I'm psychologically dependent. And we see that a lot with the behaviors like gambling. I won't probably feel physical need to go to the casino, but psychologically, I'll be driven to go there, right? That compulsion will come. So the good news about our mental health continuum and this continuum is we go both ways. Right? So maybe you're sitting here going, yeah, Cheryl, I can see, I'm on social media way too much. or I'm eating at times when I shouldn't be eating, or maybe I'm over-exercising or under-exercising. Good news. We can slide back here, right, to more of a regular recreational use, experimental use, or no use, so we can move on this continuum. But one thing I'd like to just point out, that when we hit that red dotted line, it's not really a continuum that goes straight across, is it? When we hit regular use, it's more of a slippery slope, right? So how far I'm down this slippery slope of depending on people's feedback or substances or behaviors, it's going to take me a little effort to climb back up that slippery slope, isn't it? And get moving over on this continuum. So sometimes that effort surprises people, and people are like, this is harder than I thought. And it's like, yes, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's harder than it looks, for sure, but it's doable, right? I could never remain in a job for 20 years if I didn't see people find success with their mental health and addictions, right? Like, none of us could stay in a job where people couldn't find that, that next step. And so it's harder once we cross that spot, but still doable. Okay, Mike, if we can go to the next one. So let's look at the tip of the iceberg. We're just going to stay on this addiction piece just a smidgen more, and then we're going to get into more of the mental health piece, is if we look at the tip of the iceberg as the alcohol, the drugs, the gaming, the overeating, you know, those are the things that are kind of easier to see. Imagine if someone came in today and they stumbled and they were slurring their words and they were interrupting me. People could go, oh, wow. Like, they have a real alcohol problem. It's Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock and, you know, they weren't able to come here sober. They have a real alcohol problem. But that's just the tip, right? That's just what we see. What's underneath there, or what are some things that might be underneath there that would lead someone to feel like they needed to depend on some of these things we depend on? What do you think are some of the common things that are under that iceberg, that tip? I heard poverty. Yep, so financial challenges. Trauma. So when I draw this on a whiteboard, I always put the capital T on the trauma, right? Because it's like such a big part of what people are dealing with. Sometimes childhood trauma, unresolved trauma from adulthood, it's such a big piece. So poverty, trauma. Oh, a little louder, sorry? Yes, childhood abuse. So any kind of that abuse, whether it's childhood, youth, adulthood. Yep. Stress. Yes, number one reason why people drink in Ontario. It's not what the beer commercials tell us, right? Because the beer commercials tell us we drink because we are out with friends and we're having fun. So Center for Addiction and Mental Health surveyed people from all different demographics, all different ages, different genders, and said, why do you drink? And 85% of people said, I drink to relieve stress, right? So that's a big one. Divorce, yeah, so relationship challenges. So whether that could even be a marriage breakup, it could be estrangement from an adult child, for example, estrangement from parents. There's lots of ways that we can feel those strains in relationships, right? And so some people might be using substances or behaviors to cover that. You guys are really on fire here on a Tuesday morning. You're coming out with some great ideas. Health issues, yes, physical health issues, challenges, pain, chronic pain, right? People, again, we might not see what's underneath there. Do you think it'd be fair for us to say that we might be able to put anxiety or depression symptoms underneath there sometimes, right? People are experiencing that discomfort of anxiety or that discomfort of depression, and they're trying to find the best way possible to manage those symptoms. And sometimes we might get caught in doing some things that might not be as helpful as we hope them to be. So at the beginning, sometimes substances or certain behaviors feel like, oh, this is really helping my anxiety and depression. But then we find out 3 weeks down the road, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, oh, maybe it was more of a short-term solution rather than a long-term solution. So one of the things that I always chuckle at, because I did work in the addiction field specifically for so many years, is the message that doctors give and addiction counselors give, people like me gave, maybe pastors give, and friends and family give. If you quit drinking, life will be better, right? If you quit substance using, life will be better. If you quit gambling and gaming, life will be better, right? You know, you might be able to say, yeah, I might have said those words to someone at one point. Okay, you tell me what you think happens when we remove that tip of the iceberg, okay? So now we've removed the addictive behavior, then what's going to happen? Yeah, up comes all that pain, and then what are people going to manage that pain with, right? And so we want to invite people to maybe find different ways to manage some of their mental health symptoms, but not without that support, right? And we're going to look at what would that support maybe look like. We're going to take a look at that. Okay, next slide. So just before we go on to the mental health piece, I just want to do my little slinky exercise. And people that were at Stephen Ministries with me, you saw this slinky exercise. It's happening again. So hopefully it will jog your memory as to what we talked about that night. So imagine, do I have any nurses in the room? Oh yes, of course, I always have to have a nurse in the room when I do these things. So I'm going to simplify how substances affect our central nervous system by using a slinky, because that's the kind of level of medical, help I need, right? My nurses, oh my goodness, they could go into details, they could talk about the brain and neurotransmitters, but we're just going to simplify it right down, because this is what really helped me to start to understand why would people continue in that cycle? Like sometimes it doesn't make sense when I would see someone return to the mission, right? And they had been doing so well for so long. It's like, but why would you go back? And so this really helps to solidify that for us. So pretend this is our central nervous system, and our central nervous system is trying to regulate our bodies. And imagine we put in depression. Did I put a slide in here for this next one? Can I see the next slide? Okay, that's okay. We'll go back to the slinky. That's perfect. There's 3 main drug categories. If I was in high school right now and I said, what are the 3 main drug categories? Bang, bang, bang. They're going to come out. Because there's so much education now in high school around this that the kids just know it. If I say, tell me the 3 main drug categories, can anybody tell me? I can get us started if you want. Opioids. Okay, so opioids are going to go under the depressant category. Okay, so we got 1 category, depressants. Stimulants, okay, good. And what's the 3rd one? Okay, hallucinogens, and we tuck marijuana, because marijuana doesn't fit perfectly in any of those ones. We tuck it in there with the hallucinogens, so good. So we've got our depressants, our stimulants, and her hallucinogens. So very quickly, imagine somebody goes home and they want to use a depressant, and let's say they use drinking. So they have 1 drink, 2 drink, 3 drink, 4 drink, 5 drink, everything is slowing down. So their heartbeat is going slower, their breathing is going slower, their brain waves are going slower, muscle coordination. You see it? You see the picture? Everything's slowing. So the main categories here are alcohol, the benzodiazepines, and the opiates. So everything slows down. This is an amazing part of how our body is created, is that when we pull away the substance, our body knows to go back to normal. It's amazing. And so someone drinks all night, and they wake up the next morning, and the body says, come on, get back to normal, get back to normal. But in an attempt for the body to get back to normal, what's it going to do? It's going to overshoot. And what do we call this? A little louder? Hangover, yes. I was doing this conference one time and someone yelled from the back, Monday morning. It's like, okay, Monday morning, a hangover, withdrawal. And then what happens is up here people are agitated, they're sweaty, they're throwing up, they have headaches. Well, this isn't what people were looking for, right? Right? They were looking for this. And so now the next day they're paying the consequence of getting what they felt like they needed at that moment the next day. Then let's look at this through a mental health lens and imagine that the person who went home to drink for the evening didn't start off like this. Imagine they were really struggling with anxiety. And they maybe didn't even have the words to tell you that they're struggling with anxiety. They just know their heart's racing, their mind's racing, they feel clammy, and they're just tired of feeling this way. And when they go home and start drinking, oh my goodness, they're getting a huge relief, aren't they? They're like, this isn't a social drink, this is like medication to them. And so when they stop that next night and they wake up the next morning, not only do they have to deal with the hangover, the withdrawal symptoms, but they're going to have to deal with all their anxiety again. What is that person going to be tempted to do? If they're out of alcohol, maybe they're going to look for benzodiazepines. If they're out of benzodiazepines, maybe they're going to look for opiates, right? They're going to be tempted to find something to push that back down. And this starts to make the sense of this cycle between mental health and addictions around why people keep returning to this thing. It's a short-term solution right? We kind of all can agree here, it's not going to work long term, but in that moment, you could understand the person's desire to not have to feel this so intensely. So then somebody gave me the second category, stimulants. So let's imagine we're at a regular central nervous system and we put in a stimulant. What are common stimulants? There are stimulants here today in our room with us. What are? Caffeine, yeah. Tobacco, so caffeine and nicotine would be our legal stimulants. What about our not so legal stimulants? Cocaine, crystal meth, right? Things that make us go up. So people are at a regular central nervous system. Let's say we're going to use cocaine for an example. They go up, and up here, their heart is racing. They're walking very quickly. They're talking very quickly. They're having grandiose thoughts, things like, I can jump off that bridge and be okay, or I can outrun that train. And that's why it kind of feels risky when people are in this state, because they have this grandiose sense of themselves, almost like they're superheroes. But then the next day, they're out of their cocaine. They need to kind of get back into their family life or work life, or dogs need to be walked. There's some demands happening. And so they stop using cocaine. And what does the body say to do? Go back to normal. But what's the body going to do? It's going to overshoot normal, right? And what do we call this? So my coffee drinkers in here, I saw you having coffee this morning. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You had your 2 coffees in the morning, and you start to feel the what? The crash, right? And so caffeine drinkers here know exactly what that feels like. So cocaine users are now in the crash, and it's going to take several days for them to feel like they can come back up into normal. But let's, again, look at this through an anxiety depression lens. Let's imagine before the person went to use cocaine, they were feeling really depressed. They were feeling very low. Again, maybe they don't even have words to describe it, or maybe they do know they have depression. Maybe they didn't find success with the medications. Maybe they've tried a few things and it wasn't helpful, and they're feeling a little bit desperate, so they use cocaine, and it's like sweet relief. I have found the answer to my problems. The problem is you're going to wake up the next day, the crash is going to happen, and not only are they going to have to experience that crash, but their depression feelings are going to come back, and now they're going to feel lower than ever. And so thus we see this cycle maybe continuing again, right, with people trying to do the best they can with what they have, but it not working in the long term. And then lastly, we have our hallucinogens, which we tuck cannabis over here. We really trust the work of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. If you're ever Googling things, could I just encourage you that there's lots of things on the internet that might not be accurate. Center for Addiction and Mental Health really takes everything they have from research. And so we tuck cannabis over here because it doesn't fit perfectly, but things like magic mushrooms might be here, LSD, cannabis. And so it's a little bit different because people don't have the overstimulation or the crash. So this is my very scientific term from my nurses. You guys are going to be so thrilled. Everything goes wonky for a while. Yes, you heard me correctly. I said wonky. So people have a distorted reality, right, with a hallucinogen. And then it wears off. And people won't have the crash over the overstimulation, but they'll have a lot of that psychological addiction. So I always said to the guys at the treatment center when we were talking about hallucinogens, imagine I told myself I needed to use cannabis every night to fall asleep. And I do that for 20 years. And then on the 20th year, I go, I don't need that anymore. I'm just going to go to sleep. I'll be fine. And so I would say to this treatment room full of men in recovery, how well am I going to sleep? And they're like, you're not going to sleep, Cheryl. You're going to be jittery. You're going to be consumed with thoughts about it. Your mind's going to be racing. What are they describing? Psychological withdrawal, right? And so the physical withdrawal won't be as great as the psychological. So my sister is a student success teacher, or was a student success teacher. She's now in guidance, but here at a high school in Peterborough. And she had these 8 grade 10 boys were really struggling with coming to English class. They were not interested. And I think English was right after lunchtime. So all the teachers are complaining, we can't manage these boys. So she's like, I'm going to form a mini class. I'm going to buy them books that will have like substance use, runaways, mental health concerns, relationship challenges. I'm going to buy them books that will maybe fit more into their lifestyle. I'm going to make them snacks. She was just committed that these grade 8 boys were going to get their grade 10, these 8 boys were going to get their grade 10 diploma. So I was in seeing my kids at school one day, and she said, would you come in and do your Slinky presentation? These kids get nothing. They never get the special class trips, the special anything. Wouldn't it be fun for them to have a special speaker? I'm like, of course. So in I go with some Slinkies with them. They won't touch the Slinky. They won't make eye contact. I'm getting nothing from them. I'm trying to pull out a few little things. I'm getting nothing. So I get to the part about the hallucinogens, and I say, so everything goes wonky, we have a distorted reality, and then it wears off, and we won't have the crash or the overstimulation. But before I could get into my little chitty chat about the psychological withdrawal, all of a sudden there's people shifting in their seats. There's hands going up, people are looking at me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I think this Slinky presentation really captured something here. I think I might have broken through. So I say yes to the first person, and he says, so you're saying just use the hallucinogens? I was like, oh no, that's not what I'm saying. Yes, humbled, yes. No, they were not excited about the Slinky presentation. They were looking for their way out to go home and tell their parents. Cheryl, the addiction counselor, was in, and she said just use the hallucinogens. But we ended up, from that, breaking through in that part, we ended up having a wonderful discussion is what does happen when we use something to distort our reality and then it fades, and how might that affect our mental health? So we know over the years, I've seen lots of young people struggling with psychosis symptoms, and almost always they use cannabis, okay? So imagine this person experiencing negative thoughts coming in, distorted reality. It might feel really scary, a sense of they're not sure where they start or where they end. There might be a lot of fear associated to it, and they might use cannabis or maybe mushrooms, and they get this distorted reality for 20 minutes, right? They get a break from their real reality. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes go by, then comes back the real reality, right? You could understand why they might be tempted to then use again, right? As a way to have a break from that. And so we were able to have a really good example, a live example for these young people about why people might still get trapped with hallucinogens. Okay, so maybe you feel like Cookie Monster and like me at times with my chocolate eating. Oh yes, I can stop at any time, right? Maybe you've all been there. And so let's take a look at a way, and this next chart is going to be looking at addictions and mental health, about how people make change. And this is the part that makes me so excited, because the press has a lot to say about the negative things that are happening around addictions and mental health. And I get to be a part of like this change process where I'm in community centers, I'm in private practice, I'm speaking to people like you, where change can happen, change is possible. And sometimes I feel like with media, American television, things like Celebrity Rehab, Dr. Phil, interventions, they give a very strong view around like people are always coming back and they're always relapsing. But you know, the good news is people get better and they stay better, right? And people might struggle, because that's a normal part of being human, but they still can maintain that change. So let's take a look at the stages of change, and I want you to be thinking about this, so I'll give both examples to you around in an addiction way, but also with our mental health symptoms, how we might be able to find some success. So first of all, people start off feeling pre-contemplative. They're not yet ready to make change. They don't know why they would need to make change, okay? So can I give you an example? I was working at a center in the community, and a gentleman called and said, hi, my probation officer told me to give you a call. So that is so helpful to me, because what that means is that he's committed a crime where he was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and probation's asking him to come and do a 3-part series at where I work. Very easy peasy. They might not be ready to make change yet, but we're going to give them some good education. We're going to try to show them a really warm, welcoming environment. So if ever they do want to make changes, they would feel welcome. So I'm like, oh my goodness, let me set you up for that. No problem at all. Looked up his name in the system. Oh, he's in our system. Oh, so I say, oh, you're in our system. Oh, you did the program. You did the program in September. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe probation just needs a letter to prove that he did it. I'm like, if you need a letter or a certificate, I could whip that up for you today. You could pick it up, or I'll fax it right over to probation if that you can give me consent to do that, and you can be on your way. And he said, no, I need to do it again. So I was kind of being a little bit, maybe this was like April, May, June, it was springtime, and he did it in September, so I was being a little naive and going, no, like you just need to do it once, like that's all you need to do it. And he said, oh, like I was arrested again, and they want me to do it again. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So you were arrested again, you were under the influence of alcohol and drugs, and they want you to repeat the program. Yes, let me sign you up, no problem at all. And he said, I don't know why they want me to do this. I don't have a problem with alcohol or drugs, right? That's somebody who's pre-contemplative, right? They've crossed that line where there's now lots of problems associated with their drinking or drug use, but they can't see it. They still has a disconnect. He's only coming because probation asked him to come. So what was the word, do you think, we used to use talking about labels? We used to use kind of a judgy term, and we'd go, they're in what? They're just in denial, right? Well, that is a little bit judgy, and I'll tell you why. Because every one of us in this room are pre-contemplative about something. So maybe I find out, you know, in 7 years I should have been eating Brussels sprouts all along, right? And they're good for my health. And I start eating Brussels sprouts. It's a little bit judgy to say, oh, well, Cheryl was in denial about the Brussels sprouts. It's like I didn't realize the impact that Brussels sprouts could have on my health. But once I realized it, I made that change. So people are in pre-contemplation. They might get information. They might get a little nudge from the probation officer. They might get a little nudge from their partner, their boss. Something happens which makes them start to go, wait a minute. And they start to contemplate back and forth, do I have a problem? I don't know. So for me, it would be Diet Pepsi. I love Diet Pepsi. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And I drank it for many, many years. And my parents, when I was, I think 13 or 14, it came out on the market, like Diet Colas, and it was advertised as the healthy drink for your kids. So all these parents were going out and buying their kids Diet Cola, thinking, oh, I'm good parents, it's going to save their teeth, they don't have sugar, not knowing what all the research was going to come out with aspartame. But I'd already had a taste of it before aspartame warnings came, and it was a lot harder to make those changes. So I decided maybe about 8 years ago to at least cut it back to 1 in the morning and 1 at night. I was a bear for about a month. A bear. I remember waking up one day, and you know, I have a loving husband, loving 2 kids, a loving dog, a job I love. Things are going really well. I remember waking up and going, it's morning, I can have another Diet Pepsi, because I had to wait till the next morning, right, to have another one. This is the first thought of my mind in the life that I'm living, is that Diet Pepsi has become above all of that, right? And so it just lets you know kind of that compulsion that kind of stays with you. And so I spent a lot of years contemplating, kind of like, is the aspartame that bad? Is all this research real? You know, people are chuckling, I'm sure, because it's like, of course it's real, Cheryl, right? But, you know, some things I would think about is, but the little mice are so little, and I'm so big, and, you know, could there be a difference there, you know, with all of that, right? And again, just those ways that your mind can try to coax you into staying in this cycle. So how you can tell if you're in contemplation cycle, or if I'm in contemplation cycle, is we say, yes, I do need to change that. Like, yes, exercise is really good for my mental health. I need to be going out for a 15-minute walk every day. Yes, but how we know we're in contemplation is the but appears. But I'll do it in the spring when it's warmer, right? Yeah, are you with me, right? I maybe should cut back on binge eating at night. You know, it's not good for me, it's hard on my health. But, right, it's better than drinking, or it's better than substance use, right? So we start doing this yes, but. And then something happens in this contemplation stage where either my conscience wins out and I decide to keep going, or the substance or the mental health symptoms win out and I just go back to not thinking about it anymore. So let's say, you know, it wins out and I'm like, yes, I want to keep moving in this change process. I go into this preparation stage of change. So maybe we're sitting here today going, you know what, I'm living with too much anxiety or depression symptoms. Like, I need some relief from this. You know, it's too much. Preparation might be like, I'm going to start calling around, seeing what services are in Peterborough. And there's some in the PowerPoint. I've also given you another handout, a faith-based therapist you might want to. Or you might be saying like, hey, exercise is really good for my mental health. I'm going to start calling up some gyms. Or maybe I'm more of a swimmer. Or maybe I need to ask a friend to walk with me, right? We start preparing for it. So we're not really making the change yet, but we're getting started. Keep in mind, we could be in pre-contemplation stage for years and years and years. We could be in contemplation stage for months or years, preparation stage for months and years. This is how the change process works, right? We got to kind of keep at it, keep working at it, so we don't slowly start slipping back. So let's say we're preparing, and then the action stage is where these two researchers, Francesca and De Clemente, say action is when we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, right? So if you're saying, I'm only going to have one drink a night, you're doing that goal. Or if you're saying, for my mental health, I need to start taking my medications more regularly. I'm going to set a timer in the morning. Then you're doing that. Or, you know what really makes my anxiety terrible? Watching the news. So I'm going to stop watching the news. I'll just get the headlines from my friends. I don't need to hear it, right? You are actually doing what you need to be doing for your mental health and your addictions. And then Francesca and De Clemente suggested there's this maintenance stage where there's a little bit of comfort. We need a little less support in this stage. We've gotten tons of support in action stage, maybe pastors, ministry leaders, partners, therapists, groups. You know, groups are a wonderful way for us to get together with people and say, hey, we're not alone in this struggle. And in this maintenance stage, we're just there we keep doing what we're supposed to be doing and having the success we're supposed to be having. And then you see relapse, and the relapse can happen at any point in this. So imagine you leave today and you say, maybe I will start exercising, because that will be so good for my anxiety symptoms. And then you call a gym and you're like, oh, it's $52 to come here? Oh, I have to do this extra. Oh, I need special running shoes. Oh, the daycare is only open at certain times. What might happen is we start talking ourselves out of it, right? Or we go back into contemplation stage. Sometimes this happens with addictions, is that when I worked in the addiction field, the majority of people actually get better in community treatment. And residential treatment is a wonderful support for people who've tried community treatment and it wasn't helpful, so they moved to residential. But we were only sending about 3 to 5% of people away to residential treatment, so that's a very small percentage. American television tells us what addiction treatment is residential treatment. Have you ever seen a Dr. Phil show? At the end of Dr. Phil goes, okay, we're going to get you connected to Canadian Mental Health Association. We're going to get you connected to an addiction center. We're going to get you connected to AA. No, right? What do? They go to a residential treatment center. So it starts to kind of train our brains thinking like, oh, treatment is residential, right? And that's part of treatment, and I was part of it, and I loved being part of it, but it's only a small percentage of people who need that. The majority of people need to stay in the community, keep working, keep walking the dogs, keep being with their kids, keep going to church on Sunday, and find some success that way. And so relapse can happen at any point of this spot, and if someone, let's say for addictions, thinks that I need to go away to residential treatment, that's what's going to help me feel better, and they go to our local community agency and they say, oh, it's going to be about 6 to 8 week wait. They might go 6 to 8 week wait. I can't be waiting for that long. And they might come back into not thinking about it, right? In reality, the community treatment center would have them in every day for groups. They would be having crisis support. They could have phone support. They could come in and meet people. So it's basically like recovery could start at that moment. But if we kind of have this rigid feeling in our head, like treatment's only going to look a certain way, we might need to dismantle that a little bit, because everyone in this room will have a different treatment plan. So if you're struggling with depression, what's going to work for you is going to be very different than what works for me and what works for someone else. I always use the idea of gardening. So I have people come in and go, Cheryl, I garden. It's 45 minutes later, it feels like 1 minute. I just get lost in the earth and the beauty of it, and I'm pruning things, and it's just the best thing for my soul. If I can just go home and spend a couple of hours in the garden, I just feel the stress. I'm in the garden for 7 minutes. I'm about ready to pull my hair out. I'm so stressed. I don't like it. I don't enjoy anything of it. So someone saying, oh, Cheryl, you should go home and garden for 3 hours, that is not what Cheryl should be doing. I can assure you, right? But the good news is, there's things that Cheryl can do to help ease her depression and anxiety symptoms, right? But we have to find our way in that. So the idea of what I want to encourage people is, can you find yourself in that? So let's say you're saying to me today, Cheryl, I do drink a little too much coffee, and I get kind of anxious at mid-afternoon. Very normal, right? Would you be ready to maybe go to that next step of, maybe I'll have an herbal tea at 1 o'clock, or maybe I'll do a decaf at 1 o'clock, or maybe I'll do half decaf, half regular in the morning, right? How can you start to prepare to cut back? Or maybe someone here is going, Cheryl, I need to practice those breathing skills. I need to practice the breathing skills. I need to keep remembering to use them. Like, what could you be doing to move out of this contemplation stage of, yeah, I should be doing it, but I just never do it? You know, do we need sticky notes? Do we need timers on our phone? What I want to encourage us is we need to be relentless about our symptoms, right? So no more being the brave little soldiers, the women that we are, that says, it's okay, you know, I've lived like this for 20 years. It's like, maybe we can find a way to live a little differently, right? And then as that change happens, we can live a little differently again. And then as that change happens, we can live a little bit differently again until we can find some relief. I always like to give this example, just a small little example from my life. My chocolate friend's here, so she'll understand this. When you go into the Lansdowne Place, first thing, Laura Secourt, right there, right? And I always had a little habit. If I was in Lansdowne Place, I need a little chocolate. I don't know, do I not have the strength to make it through Lansdowne Place without having my little chocolate? But I guess I feared I didn't have enough strength. So this was just my little habit. But isn't it funny, the days I go to the gym, if I have to go to the mall, I can walk right by Laura Secourt. But how is that possible? There's no connection to the gym and Laura Secourt, right? But there is the change processes happening, right? And I've already done something positive for myself. I'm feeling stronger, and I can walk by. And instead of going up the escalator, I use the back stairs, right? But I always use the escalator. How does this work, right? Change begets more change. And sometimes we just need to get started on those tiny little things and get a little bit of mastery over them. And we work our way into where we're feeling like we're in this action stage of change, and then we're into maintenance. So again, this could take months and years, but you're worth it. You're worth the change. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So what kind of an approach should we be taking when we think about our mental health and possible addiction concerns? So a biopsychosocial spiritual approach was just as a long way of saying we need to take a holistic approach. We're not going to get well if we're only looking at one of those things. So a biological approach might be like, maybe with my particular chemistry in my body, I need medications to help with my cravings for my addictions, or maybe I need medications to help with my mental health. Psychological, maybe I think a certain way. Maybe I've experienced trauma in my childhood, and so I think a certain way. Maybe some of my interpretations of things might be quite extreme. Maybe I feel a little bit distorted sometimes with my thoughts. Things like, I went out in the evening and I think everyone hated me, right? When I come home, right? That might be an extreme thought that can be maybe countered. There's the social piece. So often, birds of a feather, what do? We flock together, right? And so what happens is, especially with addictions, is that people find themselves using about the same amount they do, and then we let ourselves off the hook and we say, everyone uses this way, right? Well, no, the people that you hang around with use that way, and maybe they can use substances differently than you, and it doesn't affect them as much, right? And so maybe we have to pull apart from our social group and be around people who are more committed to health. Right? And so this is a wonderful opportunity of that. It's creating these social connections with people where we can focus on our health. And then there's the spiritual approach, right? Who am I and why do I exist? Right? And that has got to be taken care of, right? Before we start recovering from some of these things like mental health and addictions, is who am I? Why am I here? So I'll give you an example. I was working with a mom at a community agency. She was very concerned about her son. Her son had some serious opiate addiction. He was homeless. She was very worried about him. And she would come in to see me, and I would offer her support. And it's a real process of her being able to let go and recognize that she cannot control her 34-year-old son, and she can wish him well, and she can point him towards recovery, but she can't make him do it, right? And nothing is more powerless for a mom than having to let that go. And so she often would be very self-blaming, you know, although it was not her fault. You know, sometimes us moms can take on that self-blame and go, maybe I shouldn't have taken him to church. Maybe I should have taken him to church more. Maybe I shouldn't have put him in hockey. Maybe I should have put him in hockey more. Maybe I should have got him a tutor, and all of that overthinking that we can do, right? And so her being able to challenge some of that thinking that says, oh, right, he's 34, these are his choices, right? I'm not a reflection of that. So I was working at a crisis unit several years later, and I went up to where the residents stay, and I would offer people addiction and mental health support every day, and then I wouldn't come back again on Monday. So this was a Friday, so I wouldn't be back till Monday, and they said, there's somebody here, they would like to see you, they have mental health concerns and addiction concerns. I'm like, sure. So I go and I meet this young man, very warm, very charming, very talkative, very open. But as he told his story, I began to realize, oh, I know who this person is. This is the son of that woman I worked with years ago. Just like my thoughts in my head going, oh, I'm connecting this. This is him. So he's telling me his story, and I said to him, okay, I can offer you support today. We can make a coping plan. I'll be back again on Monday. And I said, what can you do to be successful between Friday at 3 o'clock and Monday morning at 8:30? How can we make this coping plan? Because my fear, of course, is if he was to relapse, he wouldn't be able to stay in this crisis unit, right? So I have to help him to stay within the rules. And he said, oh my goodness, he was just so kind about it. Oh my goodness, don't worry about me. This is not a concern for you. I'm here to live hard and die young. Don't you worry about me at all. So if he's answering the question, who am I and why am I here, and he's here to live hard and die young, right? Then it's going to be really hard to shift into that stages of change without him finding a new purpose in his life, to see himself differently. If I see myself as a person, for example, like a child of God, I want to make the world a different place, I want to be part of the change process, then I might have a different view around substances, right? And so it's really important for us to be able to take this holistic view, and I've given us some suggestions coming up, and hopefully as we look at the suggestions, you'll be able to go, oh, that would fall more in the bio part, oh, that's more the psychological part, that's more the social part, that's more the spiritual part, but we want to make sure that we have it all taken care of. Okay, so here are some things that might help. Why did I write what might help instead of this is going to help? Yes. So if you're looking at this slide going, won't help me, that's okay. Let this slide pass by, we'll get you another one, right? Let's just be open to maybe there's something that might help. Am I saying might reduce all your cravings, might reduce all your anxiety, might reduce all your depression? No, of course not. I'm always going to live with some semblance of anxiety my whole life. I'm just going to always do that, but I can always make sure that if as its age getting higher, I'll be able to find ways to bring it down, right? So maybe there are some people in the world that are experiencing anxiety lower than me, but as long as I'm not experiencing it up here and I'm getting it down to here, this is much more manageable for me. So, I'm back. Sorry, Mike, sorry. So, living a healthy lifestyle that includes good sleep, hygiene, exercise, sunlight, and nutrition, we call this the foundation, okay, of emotional and mental health. So if people are like, I don't like any of those things, I don't like how any of those things sound, well, it's tough because this is our foundation to build good, strong mental and emotional health. So what are you like when you don't get enough sleep, you have no exercise, you don't get enough sunlight, and you're eating junky food? Yeah, would it be safe to say that if I did a little social experiment, we all went home today, and all of us made a commitment, we're not going to exercise, we're not going to sleep good, we're not going to get sunlight, we're not going to eat good, that if we meet back here in a month, would it be fair for me to say that we will all have slipped, our mental health will all have slipped, right? None of us could maintain it, right? So you could be like, well, I think I'll be okay. You won't be okay, right? Do you know what is the trickiest part of depression? Is depression tells us, don't get sunlight, right? Depression says, shut the curtains, the sun is hurting my eyes. Depression says, eat cheesies for breakfast, not oatmeal. Depression says, oh, the phone's ringing, it's a supportive person, don't pick it up. Depression says, don't go for a walk, nothing's going to change, right? Depression doesn't say at 10 o'clock, pop yourself into bed and get a good night's sleep, right? Depression says, just keep watching the movie, right? Keep numbing, right? And so isn't it so sad that the very things that we should be doing for our depression and anxiety, our depression is actually tricking us to do the opposite, right? So it does become a little bit of a have to, like I have to get out for a walk. That's what I have to do. I have to get some sunlight. I have to try to eat good food, right? Don't start your day with cheesy, start your day with some oatmeal, right? Because it's going to make a difference. And so this is the foundation of our mental health. So people could be sitting here going, but Cheryl, that's the foundation of our physical health. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you. Our physical health and our emotional health are completely connected. If I had the stomach flu, and I called you and said, I have the stomach flu, and I need to remortgage my house, and I start talking to you about numbers and what I should be doing, if you were wise friends, you would be saying to me, Cheryl, just get over the stomach flu, right? Don't be thinking about remortgaging your house right now. Get over the stomach flu, start feeling strong again, and then you can go work on the remortgaging, right? We don't want to make big decisions when we're feeling ill. So if our physical health is not optimal, we're going to expect that that's going to affect our emotional and mental health, right? And so we need to be doing this foundation for both. Okay, next one. So here's one for the spiritual side of things. Start with prayer. I think that's a great place to start. It gives me tremendous comfort to know that my Creator cares about me. He's interested in how my body works. He's interested in how my mind works. He's interested about my emotions. But sometimes I feel like in the past, maybe I kind of stopped there. And I needed to make it a step, maybe even make it the first step, but don't just get stuck there. Pray as you head to the gym. Pray as you go get sunlight. Pray as you call a friend. Pray as you, maybe people were anxious this morning and feeling down this morning, and you said, I'm going there, right? You prayed, but then you kind of pushed yourself, got in the car, and came today. So can we kind of feel the balance of, we want to be praying, and we also want to make sure we're doing our part in this process. Okay, next one. Okay, allow yourself not to know all of the answers and seek support as needed. So this is another part about women that I see, is that we kind of sometimes feel like we're supposed to be all-knowing, right? That we're supposed to know. And we kind of tend to put a lot of our focus on people out here, and we tend to neglect ourselves. And so if you're saying, Cheryl, I don't know why my anxiety spikes, at this period of time or this season. I don't know why my depression is so connected to my trauma. Yeah, you're not supposed to know, right? I broke my tib fib. I didn't sit around in my driveway after I broke my tib fib saying to my husband, it might be a break, it might be a fracture, I don't know, right? No, we just got in the car and we went into the hospital and we let them do their thing, right? And so can I just encourage you, you're not alone in this. You're not supposed to know necessarily the next steps of how to manage your depression, your anxiety, your substance use, but there's lots of supports out there that we can reach out to. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go to the support page. Okay, another thing that might help is acknowledge your feelings and validate yourself. So these are some of the things you might be feeling. So when we're experiencing anxiety and depression, we sometimes don't enjoy those emotions as much. So people will say, I don't like my emotions. And I always chuckle and go, I've never heard you in here complaining about joy. I was really joyful all weekend. I didn't like it, right? No, people don't do that. Or I was so peaceful all weekend. No, what we're saying is we don't want to experience certain emotions, right? So some of the emotions that we get tired of feeling is sadness, anxiety, the low state. And so just think of emotions as a signal. So when I woke up this morning, just a little bit of anxiety, like, got puppies, I got to get them going, got to get a good breakfast into me, because I got to be at Living Hope at 9 o'clock, right? But that anxiety could be used as a good thing, right? It's a signal in my body that says, get going, like, you got something important to do. Imagine I woke up, though, and my anxiety was 10 out of 10. And I felt paralyzed, like I can't leave this house, everyone's going to hate me, I'll never get invited back, all of this catastrophic thinking. I might end up feeling quite immobilized. And so what happens is we often want to push down those emotions, right? Because we don't want to feel them. Emotions are like toddlers. If you ignore a toddler, what's going to happen? Oh, they're exploding. Their emotions are all over the place. They're stamping, they're hitting, they're yelling, right? When we keep pushing down our emotions and pushing down and pushing down and pushing down, they're like an angry toddler. They want you to hear them, so they're going to come back louder, right? And so then we work hard pushing it down, and they come back and pushing it down. How could we find a way maybe to acknowledge our feelings and validate them? First thing in the morning, we wake up, I'm feeling a little low today. Wow, okay, what do I do when I feel low? I know exactly what I do. I do this, I do that. I'm here for you, body. I'm here for you, emotions. I'm going to take care of you. Almost like you're talking to a child. So it's really fascinating as we keep pushing and pushing and pushing. We think we're helping ourselves, but it's going to have that boomerang effect and try to come back up again. So sometimes just simply acknowledging how we feel. They did this research, and have you ever seen, we've all seen this on TV, someone are going up to get an award, and often what do they say is, I'm so anxious, I'm so worried, right? Why are they saying that? The very act of them saying, I'm so anxious, has brought them down one notch, right? Because validating, they're saying out loud what they're experiencing. So is that like, I'm saying it out loud to my partner, I'm journaling it, I'm calling a friend and telling them, I'm calling a crisis line. How am I able to acknowledge my feelings, maybe validate them myself, or have others validate? Okay, next slide. What else might help? Okay, avoid or reduce substance use might help. Could we replace them with maybe more healthy activities? And I put in brackets, this includes coffee, because if you're here and you're struggling with mood instability, you really want to be careful about how much coffee you're drinking. Over the years, I've had many clients in my office say, I'm just so anxious and jittery all the time. And I say, well, how many cups of coffee do you drink? And they go 6 to 8 cups a day. And I'm like, there, we got it. We found the answer, right? So you might be prone to being jittery and anxious like myself, right? But you add 8 cups of coffee, and that's a wild ride. If you don't think coffee is addictive, go to a treatment center and watch people come off of coffee. Right? I've had people in my office, grown men, crying, saying, if you could get me a coffee or sugar, I think I can stay. These are people quitting cocaine, heroin, alcohol. They're not begging me for that. They're begging me for the sugar and the caffeine. Yes?
Yesterday is one example. I went to get blood work done, and I had to fast, so I didn't have a coffee. By 11 o'clock, I had the worst migraine headache. I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
So my husband took me right to the Lakefield Jack's restaurant, and I belted back like an alcoholic. 2 coffees, headache gone.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. It's very addictive, right? And so I'm not like saying like you can never have a coffee. Of course you can have a coffee. I would make sure that you would time that coffee earlier in the day. Never have a coffee past 1 p.m. Because it will disrupt your sleep. If you're one of those people who's saying, I have terrible sleep, I don't think it's the coffee, let's just assume it is the coffee. So we all know those people. I have a person in my life who can drink coffee right before they go to sleep, and it doesn't, they sleep through the night. That's fine. But those are very rare people. Maybe we kind of want to start here. Okay, next one. What might help? Okay, so we're going to have a little 5-minute blurb about boundaries, because I feel like boundaries are very connected to our mental health. And I'm going to tell you why as we talk. Okay? So we might need to establish and enforce healthy boundaries as needed. If you have difficult and challenging people in your life draining you every single day, right? What is the impact on your emotional and mental health? So you have difficult and challenging people pulling from you every single day. What's going to happen?
I go crazy.
Pardon?
I go crazy.
Yeah, you go crazy. Tell me about what crazy means to you. Like you go what? Tell me. Yes. Like stressed?
I don't know. It's just, well, give my son for example.
Yeah.
Drive me crazy, so I have full anxiety.
Yep. So you feel your mental health symptoms are climbing, right? Absolutely, yeah, yeah. So some of the things we're going to want to include into our life are the do's, right? Like exercise, nutrition, sleep, good sleep, sunlight. Some of the things we need to be doing for our mental health is the no's. Does that make sense, right? So let's look at what that might look like. Okay, so next one. So I'm a giver. I promote giving. If anybody here is panicking about, oh no, is Cheryl going to say not to be a giver? No, I want us to be giving. There's a very big difference between giving and over-giving, okay? Can we look at this? Okay, so I'm a big proponent of us all being giving people. I actually think it's good for our mental health. We know that contribution is a skill that helps us with our mental health. It helps us feel like we're useful, we're purposeful, we're living out our destiny. So giving is good. But are we giving to a strainer or to a bowl? So can I give you an example of these two things? And my daughter says I can use her as an example. This is not a real life story, but she said I could use her as an example. My daughter goes to school in Toronto. She calls me the first month, it says, Mom, I blew it. I'm $89 over my budget. Are you okay to spot me that $89? For people who know me, am I sending that $89? Of course I am. It's going to be sent before we're done the phone call, right? It's like, okay, do better next month, off you go. Let's say she takes that $89, she uses it next month. Yes, Mom, I was able to budget. I organized myself, and I got it. I'm at zero, but I'm not in the hole. Woohoo! You did great, right? And she keeps doing that. But imagine another scenario. I send that $89. She says, thank you so much. And then she comes home on the weekend, and I see her wearing new pairs of boots. I'm like, oh, okay, that's where the misbudgeting happened, right? But, don't say anything. The next month she calls me, I'm short 129. Okay, maybe that will be gone, maybe. But it'll be a bit more of a sterner conversation, right? Around, what are you doing with your money? Have you been able to make a budget? Did you talk to a financial person? Like, what are you going to be doing to get back on track? Imagine the next month it's 259, and the next month it's 389, and the next month it's 429. You guys are following the math, right? So you guys are a bunch of givers here, right? You guys are giving people, so I should keep doing it, right? Right? I should keep giving. Yeah, come on, guys. We want to be seen as givers. Yeah. Why should I not keep giving? It's not going to stop because she's a strainer, right? Does that mean she's going to be a strainer for the rest of her life? Of course not. Hopefully her brain will continue to develop, and a couple of years down the road she gets it back together, or maybe this hard life lesson of, oh, my mom's not going to keep bailing me out. I got to pull this together, right? And she can go back to being the bull. But there's lots of ways that people can be strainers in our life. If you have a toddler, sorry, you just gotta have your little strainer, right? They're just a little cesspool of needs, right? But if your kids are teenage years, young adults, maybe they're in-laws, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a spouse, where you're like, Cheryl, the more and more I give, the more they take, right? We got to reassess at that point, right? Because are we throwing those pearls before swine, right? And we're just throwing out these pearls, but it's not going, one thing we know that swine don't need pearls, right? Am I just giving, and it's not going in the right direction? And should I be investing my finances into the bulls? That where I give them that money, they take that leg up. Let's talk about emotional support and strainers and bulls. So I was in the ministry years ago, and here I am dating myself drastically. There were no cell phones, so we all had a landline. And people my age and above will remember we did not turn the ringer off on landlines, right? If people called and they knew you were home, they knew you weren't picking up the phone, right? And so 7 a.m., parishioner called from our church. She wanted to talk. She needed encouragement. Of course, nothing I'd rather do than start my day off giving some encouragement to someone. And it was a lot about how she was struggling with her kids, and a lot about how she was struggling with her husband, and she didn't like her house, and she didn't like this, and she didn't like that. And, Cheryl's just bolstering, pouring into the bowl, which I thought was the bowl. But what happens if you spend 20, 25 minutes on the phone between 7 and 7:25? Oh, you're a little bit running late yourself, right? So kids have to go in the bath, and lunches need to be packed, and, so my life is getting a little bit negatively affected, but it's like I'm glad to do it. The next day, 7 o'clock, ring-a-ding-a-ding, ring-a-ding-a-ding, pick up, it's her. The next day, do you see the pattern here? It didn't matter how much encouragement, support, bolstering I was doing, it was just going through the strainer, right? And there was a lot of people at our church at that time who were like bulls, that if you did pour into some spiritual insight or emotional support or maybe physical support, like you help someone move, they were like a bull and they could hold it, right? And so I had to do a really hard life lesson of figuring out, if I keep giving to the strainer, I'm just enabling this process to keep going. I'm just helping needy people be more needy, right? But if I'm a little wiser of where my finances go, where my time goes, where my financials go, I can still be a giver. I can be giving, but I'm giving in a way that's more productive, right? So we're all about giving, but we're going to try to hold up on the over-giving. Can we feel the difference of those two things? Can we feel how our mental health is going to be deteriorating quickly if we have a whole bunch of strainers in our life, right? It's going to take a lot of hard work and boundary setting. Thank you for the yes out there. All right. Next one. So you might be saying, but Cheryl, you don't understand. It's my mother. Because, I can play this little game with you all day long, right? It's always somebody you're connected with, because if it wasn't someone you're closely connected with, you would have gotten rid of them years ago, right? It's my best friend from public school. It's my adult kid. I know they're 36, but they act like they're 16, right? This is what I often are hearing. It's all of these, excuses as to why we allow challenging people to continue to drain us and affect my anxiety and affect my depression. And so I love this little rhymey, again, I like to simplify things, the slinky, the little rhymey words, because this is what helps me to remember. So we have the first place I think I would want to invite us to start when we're setting boundaries is, can we be gracious? Imagine I was driving here this morning and someone cut me off. I'm not going to fly into a rage. I'm not going to pull over and start screaming at people. Let's just start off with being gracious, right? I think that's a nice place for us to start. I think it's good for our mental health just to lean into being gracious, right? But imagine I came here today, and as I was getting my coat off, Anita stepped on my toe. And I was like, oh, ouch, that hurts. But I don't get upset with Anita, I just go on going. But now we're photocopying and Anita's stepping on my toe again. I was like, oh, well, that really hurts, and we're out in the coffee and Anita's walking right by and stepping on both toes. And everywhere I go, there's Anita stepping on my toes again, right? Should I stay in this gracious spot? Anita, we were talking about you stepping all over my toes and you're coming in. She's going to be very confused. If Anita steps on my toe once, we're just going to see that as a mistake. We all make mistakes, and we're going to stay in this gray spot. But if she keeps doing it, my little toes are black and blue. They're bleeding. I can't get my shoes on. Should I stay in grace? Do you think it's time for me to move on? Okay, what's the next thing? Face. So I go to Anita, go to her face to face. I say, Anita, this needs to stop. My toes are black and blue. You need to be more careful around me. Now, what are some things Anita might say to me? Come on, give it to me. Yeah, it's your fault, right? Blaming, right? It's your fault, Cheryl. Your toes were in the wrong place. So no ownership right whatsoever. She blames me. What else might she say? Yeah, look at these honkers, size 10 feet. No wonder I stopped. It'd be impossible to not stop on them, right? So there she's like being defensive, right? Again, blaming me and then rationalizing. This is why this keeps happening. It's not me, it's actually you, Cheryl. What else might she say? I'm sorry, who said that? I'm sorry? Okay. Okay, so there might be an I'm sorry and then an explanation which would help, right? I'm recovering, I'm disoriented, right? That might help. And she might say, like, it's never going to happen again. And those are my favorite ones, because you know what that means? I can just pop right back up into this gray spot. I'm very comfortable up there in this gray spot, right? Face to face, ooh, that's a little harder, going to Anita and being honest. So she might say, listen, I'm disoriented. I am going to be more careful. I'm sorry. I'll make changes. And that's great. Anita and I go right back to how we always were. But let's say Anita's got the big crocodile tears. I'll never do it again. It's never going to happen again. And as I'm leaving, she steps on my toe. And the next time I see her, she steps on my toe. Let's say I work in the same building as Anita. Every time I see her, she's stepping on my toe. Again, I tried the face-to-face, right? Something's not working. The most common thing I see when people come to see me, they go, yes, I tried the grace. Then I tried the face-to-face, and I've been talking and talking till I'm blue in the face and nothing's changing. Okay, well then you really gave it a good go, right? You've talked about it, you talked about it again, you talked about it again. I'll sometimes say, if your loved one was here with me right now, would they know your, feelings around this? And they laugh, they go, oh yeah, they know. Okay, then great. We did our face-to-face, we know that they know. Now, if they're still not changing, I want to have Anita in my life. I've appreciated Anita over all these years. It will be a loss to not have her in my life, but what other choice do I have but to create some space? So whenever I say space, there's usually a little audible gasp. Cheryl, space. Okay, can we talk about what space looks like? This is Anita stepping on my toes. This is a restraining order, right? Okay? This is her stepping on my toes. This is a restraining order. I'm for restraining orders. I've helped many people get restraining orders over the years. There's a lot of room between here and here. So let's say I come to church here, and I still want to come to church here because it's this wonderful community, and I want to be part of this church, but Anita's here. That might mean that I come in right as the service starts, right? It might mean that I see Anita sitting over here, so I sit over here for my blessing, right? It might mean at coffee break, I'm going around the long way, right? That's space too, right? Space doesn't mean I'm going to make sure I never see Anita ever again. It might mean that I just have that little bit of space. What would be another example? Let's go with somebody who's really draining. So you talked about a son, right? draining, pull, 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 pull. Space might be I go to bed 30 minutes early, do some reading, do some journaling, listening to a podcast, listening to soft, relaxing music, doing something that would be good for me. So maybe my son's 15 and I can't, have us living in different homes right now, but at least I can have that 30-minute break. It might be you don't trust a loved one to not explode in a conversation. And so you have those meetings at Starbucks instead of at your kitchen, right? Kitchens and arguments seem to go together. Every time I have a couple in my office, they're like, oh yeah, we just yell it out in the kitchen, right? I don't know why we think that we can speak to people differently in a kitchen, right, than we would anywhere else. But sometimes it's like, well, we're going to go to a Starbucks for that. Maybe it's a spouse who they're struggling with mental health and addictions, and they're not seeking support. And so you've gone to them over and over and say, honey, you got to work on this. This is really affecting our family in a negative way, and there's been nothing there. What is some space that you can have? Is it like I go to my sister's one day a week? I go on vacation with the kids because usually if they're with me, they're drinking and they ruin it, so I kind of have my own vacation. How is it that we can find some space in this to help our own emotional and mental health? One of the things I think about when I think about grace-based space is a lot of people will be like, but Cheryl, they're depressed or they're anxious or they're struggling with a substance or they're struggling with a behavior. And I say, listen, none of us are upset if our loved one has a substance use or mental health concerns. We know that 1 in 5 people are going to have a substance use and mental health concerns. We have our own substance use and mental health concerns, right? We're not upset with anyone that they have that. What we're upset about is they're not seeking treatment. Can we feel the difference? We're not upset that they have a mental health and addiction problem because we understand that that's a problem and we're gracious to it. Where the struggle is that they're not seeking treatment. My husband is a therapist as well, the most kind, compassionate, loving person. But I will tell you this, if I was, let's say, diagnosed with a physical health problem, and this is a man full of patience, and I come home and I say I have this physical health problem, is he going to be upset? Of course not. He's going to be empathetic, validating of me, encouraging. But then let me imagine I do the opposite of what the doctor said. So the doctor says, you need to be walking this much, you need to take this medication, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I don't do any of it. And then I start complaining about my symptoms. How patient is he going to be? Right? He's not going to be patient at all. So imagine I get diagnosed with diabetes. He's not going to be mad at me at all. But when I'm eating chocolate bars all day and not checking my sugars and not taking my insulin, he's going to get pretty frustrated, right? We could probably take that same application to people with mental health and addiction concerns. Again, we're not upset with them that they have mental health and addiction concerns. We're very understanding, but we invite them to make those changes, right? We invite them to make that progress because that could potentially lead to resentment, right? I see some nods here, so I think people can relate to what that feels like when that resentment comes up if people aren't doing their steps. Now, are we suggesting, let's say someone's very anxious and they come down to here, that is success, right? We're not looking from here to here. Let's say someone struggles with low moods and they have their whole life. Again, we're not suggesting that it's going to go from here to here, right? Of course not. We're going to still struggle, but if we can even bring the edge down, it will just bring more quality of life for you and for your loved one. So we're going to start off with grace. When that's not working, we got to go to faith. And when the person's just blaming us, rationalizing, minimizing their problem, probably the only thing we have left now is to create some space because I'm 100% responsible today for my mental health. And so I can blame my puppies because I'm not getting enough sleep. I can blame my adult kids, they need me, they want to call me for support. I can blame lots of things in my life, right? But when all is said and done, I'm 100% responsible for my mental health symptoms today. So if I'm 100% responsible for my mental health symptoms today, what does that mean for me? It means I gotta go get some sunshine. It means I have to eat healthy. It means I have to make sure I'm around wonderful, positive, supportive people like yourselves. It means I can't isolate. It means that I need to be taking medications if I need to take medications. There are going to be implications, right? And so if we can just kind of let that sink in, we are 100% responsible for our mental health and addiction symptoms today, and we are responsible for managing them. So we can blame lots of things, our childhood, how demanding my family is, hard work hours. We can blame a lot of things, but in reality, we have to still keep coming back that we're responsible for taking care of ourselves. Okay, next one. What else might help? So after our little boundary talk there, so we know that breathing really helps. So all of our anxious people out there, deep breaths in, slow breaths out. We want our exhales to be twice as long as our inhale. So that means if I breathe in for 4, I'm breathing out for 8. And what we want to do is start practicing these techniques when things are calm. So I have a great little illustration. No one has ever taught me to use a fire extinguisher while the fire was around my legs. Why would that be poor time? I can't think clearly, right? We want to be practicing our breathing techniques when we are calm, maybe at a red light, maybe going to bed at night, so that when we start to feel that anxiety climb, it will just come back like muscle memory. It's just like, oh yeah, I remember what I do. Progressive muscle relaxation, that's when we might be sitting or lying in bed and we're relaxing our toes, our feet, we're letting the relaxation move up to our shins, our thighs, our stomach, all the way up, and just allowing our body to have that little break from that anxiety at the moment. Yoga can be really helpful for people with anxiety. We really want to tune back into our body, or with depression. And then that practice of mindfulness, which is just about staying in the moment. So you get me thinking about my past, a whole bunch of negative emotions are going to come up. Shame, guilt, disappointment, anger. You get me thinking too much about my future, what's going to come up? Anxiety, worry, fear, right? And mindfulness is just the easy, it's not easy exercise, but just the easy simplification is that we bring ourselves back to the moment and we just get through this moment, right? And then we get through the next moment and the next moment. Okay, what might help? Taking medications as prescribed by physicians and psychiatrists might help, right? So if that's something you've tried and you're not finding it that helpful, then we're the people who we got to really work harder on the coping strategies, right? And if you're finding that medication is helpful, then you want to keep following what the doctor says. So a lot of people will say to me, like, I take it every other day, or sometimes I go 2 weeks without filling the prescription, and it's kind of like, we might not be giving it the chance that it deserves. And then practice coping strategies such as hobbies, journaling, use your 5 senses, read, crochet, gardening, only for the people who are not like me and love to garden, keep gardening. Call a crisis line, paint, play music. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of coping strategies, and we're so good at helping our kids be in activities that are good for them, aren't we? I've never had a mom in my office who are, just so busy. I'll say to them, did you have lunch today? And the common thing is no. And I'll go, did your kids get lunch today? And it's always the same. Oh, yeah, they got lunch. Their lunch is packed at school, right? And so that idea of that we're always taking care of others and we're neglecting ourselves, we are so good at getting our kids into activities, we might need some of those activities as well. Okay, next one. Consider participating in individual counseling, family counseling, or support group, and I've got some ideas for you in just one moment. Next one. Okay, why might I attend counseling? So here are some reasons. If you have feelings of anxiety or sadness for a period of time, might be nice to have a little coach. You want to resolve past traumatic situations. So someone so wisely said trauma is often, not always, but often underneath addictions and anxiety and depression symptoms. Sometimes it's nice to be able to resolve that. If you're struggling in a relationship, if you have more of a strainer than a bowl in your life, you might want to go to counseling, get some coaching. You're noticing your emotions are feeling like you're on a roller coaster. So it's like, Cheryl, like I was doing so good yesterday, but I woke up this morning and I was way down here. And then maybe this afternoon I'll feel a little bit up, but then I'll be crashing again. And that can feel quite scary. You're trying to support someone with mental health and or addiction concerns. So I have a lot of people call me and they say, my so-and-so, my son, my daughter, my mom, my husband, they need to come and see you, but they won't. Okay? So we can't make another person change, right? And I often say, I think that you're the one reaching out. I think you're the person who needs the support right now, right? Your loved one isn't ready to make change. Maybe there's changes you can make to make this more manageable for yourself. It's time to set boundaries in your life. So if anything about the bowl and the strainer and the gray space resonated with you, that might be helpful for counseling. And if you find you're struggling with just that work-life balance, we're just all pushed to the max, which really affects our anxiety and depression. And it's like, how do I pull back and actually start to include some things that will help me and support my mental health? So we've got some ideas for you. Just as an important aside, crises is a hospital situation. So don't call a therapist and say, I'm feeling like I'm going to hurt myself right now. You go to the hospital, right? You or someone's having psychosis, you go to the hospital. Someone's overdosing, hospital. I think you can kind of understand that there's some things that are just best treated at hospital because they can give that immediate support. And counselors and therapists and support groups are better when we're maybe not thriving, we're surviving maybe, but we're not in crisis. Okay, so here are some supports. We have Canadian Mental Health Association, paid for by the Ministry of Health. 4 Counties Addiction Service Team, paid for by the Ministry of Health. PRHC has a whole bunch of youth and adult mental health services. There's community counseling that's on a pay-for-fee scale. So I've put all the names down and numbers that you can Google if you want to look at it. Every family health team doctor has a therapist, a social worker connected to them. So you can say to your doctor, I want to speak to the social worker. There's going to be a bit of a wait. Sometimes I hear the 6 to 8 weeks kind of idea, depending on how backed up they are, but someone will be available to you. And then for people with addiction concerns, Alcoholics Anonymous has helped millions of people. And then we got more supports on the next slide. If you wanted to ever call Connects Ontario, they're a database of all the services. So let's say you're saying, oh, Cheryl, I have a brother in Kingston. He really needs mental health supports. You can call Connects and say, 34-year-old brother, diagnosed with bipolar, also uses substances, and they can tell you all the supports in Kingston that might be available for them. So that's sometimes nice for us, family members, for us to know that. We have Al-Anon groups for family members who are living with somebody or experiencing the impact of living with someone with addiction concerns, and then there's private therapy. So you might have gotten a list. There's tons of therapists in town, tons of excellent therapists in town. I'm a part of a small collective here, so the sheet that you had says faith-based therapists. There's just 10 on there. There's more than them. Those are just the people I know. So if you were looking to pay for out of pocket, or maybe you have insurance, you can use those people, and the other ones would be more connected to paid for by the Ministry of Health. So if there's financial burdens, do not be concerned. There's lots of good supports in the community, and if your insurance is available for you to use, you can also use a private therapist. Okay, last slide there. I'm going to end now because we're at our time, but I'll be here to answer questions. I just so appreciate people bringing up their feedback, giving suggestions. It really makes it alive, and I just pray over you that you'll be able to feel brave enough to say enough is enough when it comes to some of these symptoms you're experiencing, and saying, I really want to find some relief of bringing it down. Even if I just bring it down a little bit, it will give me some relief, and I'm worth it. And so feel free to chat with me afterwards. Thank you so much for having me. Blessings upon you all.
Wow, was that not great information? I think a lot of us have dealt with so many issues, especially through COVID. And, all the information on the news, which is depressing, and, the scariness of different, like COVID, right? So, now it's, of course, with our kids that are all getting sick, and this RSV, and every time you turn around, is something in our society that is creating anxiety and depression. So Cheryl, we're really thankful you were able to come and give us all this information. I hope everybody enjoyed the session. Feel free to have another coffee and mingle a little bit. Yeah, one more coffee. There is tea back there, by the way. Mike, thanks so much for helping us out, and thank you everybody for coming. Have a great rest of the week and a great March break.